Welcome to a moment of calm. You don't need to do anything. Just get comfortable, breathe slowly, and let this story gently guide you to sleep. Let us know in the comments how many minutes it took you to fall asleep. Sweet dreams. It is often believed that a strong soul is one that does not feel. But true strength is not born from the absence of emotion, but from the ability to govern it. It is not denying what burns inside you, but learning to hold it without letting it consume you. Epictetus understood this truth before many others, not from comfort or theory, but from a life marked by deprivation, dependence, and pain. His story shows that suffering, when observed with clarity, can become a deep source of wisdom. That pain, far from being only a punishment, can be transformed into a silent teacher. Most people look for rest outside themselves, in other people, in medicine, in constant distractions, in anything that promises immediate relief. And yet real rest begins when you understand something essential. Nothing external has the power to harm you on its own. Only your interpretation of what happens can do that. A space where every word is meant to remind you that within you already exists everything necessary to move forward with serenity. Not to eliminate pain, but to pass through it without losing yourself in it. Epictetus was born a slave. He did not know freedom, privilege, or security. And yet he was freer than many men who were never chained. He discovered a truth that cuts through the centuries. No one can imprison your mind if you do not allow it. His central teaching is simple, yet deeply transformative. What affects us is not what happens, but what we tell ourselves about what happens. That idea, when truly understood, has more healing power than any superficial comfort. Imagine for a moment that what hurts you, a loss, a disappointment, a betrayal, were neither good nor bad, only a fact. What makes it unbearable is not the event itself, but the story you build around it. Freedom begins when you stop arguing with reality and start observing your reaction. Epictetus taught that we cannot always change what happens, but we can always choose how to respond. And that choice marks the difference between emotional slavery and inner serenity. Isn't that in the end what most people need to learn? To respond instead of react. Seneca reinforced this idea in his letters. The wise man does not lament what he lacks, but learns to value what he has. Today, we would call it conscious gratitude. But the Stoics practiced it more than 2,000 years ago, not as romanticism, but as a tool to keep sanity in the midst of chaos. Marcus Aurelius expressed it clearly. The soul is dyed the color of its thoughts. What you think constantly becomes emotion, and what you feel inevitably guides your actions. In that cycle, your entire life is built. If you do not observe your thoughts, they end up governing you. Epictetus proposed a series of daily meditations. They were not mystical rituals or esoteric exercises. They were practical reminders to strengthen the mind. The first is simple and profound. Remember what depends on you and what does not. Applying this idea can reduce more anxiety than any empty advice. Most human suffering comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. Other people's opinions, outcomes, the past, the future. But the only thing truly in your hands is your attitude and your actions. The second meditation invites you to accept that everything that happens follows an order we do not always understand, not as resignation, but as emotional intelligence. When you understand that every obstacle is an opportunity to practice virtue, you stop feeling like a victim. Ryan Holiday revisits this teaching with a clear phrase: "What stands in the way becomes the way." Epictetus would have agreed. The obstacle is not a mistake of fate. It is part of the training. The third meditation goes straight to the ego. Do not build your worth on what can disappear. Money, recognition, status, everything is fragile. If your identity depends on it, your peace will always be at risk. Stoicism teaches you to build yourself on the one thing no one can take from you: your character. True greatness is not in being admired, but in living with coherence, even when no one is watching. From there, a serenity is born that does not depend on applause. The fourth meditation invites you to train the mind before life tests you. Epictetus compared existence to a competition of the soul. If you do not strengthen your inner stamina, the first adversity will break you. Suffering is not avoided, it is trained for. Wisdom does not arise from a sudden revelation, but from the conscious repetition of correct thoughts. The philosopher does not speak about the good, he practices it. Watch your mind when you get angry. Ask yourself who is ruling whom. That honest observation is worth more than any speech. Epictetus's fifth meditation goes straight to the core of human suffering. When something irritates you, hurts you, or destabilizes you, remember that it is not the situation itself that disturbs you, but the judgment you make about it. This idea, so simple on the surface, has the power to dismantle much of the emotional pain we carry every day. The human mind tends to react automatically. It interprets, labels, exaggerates. It turns neutral facts into personal threats. Epictetus invites you to interrupt that mechanism, to observe the reaction before obeying it, to ask yourself honestly, what story am I telling myself right now? Marcus Aurelius expressed it in another way when he wrote that if you remove your opinion about something, you also remove the suffering that opinion creates. Not because what happened stops existing, but because it stops ruling you. Changing the interpretation transforms the emotion. Modern psychology built much of its cognitive approach on this principle, but the Stoics already practiced it as daily discipline. When you begin to apply this way of seeing, something changes subtly. Anger loses intensity. Sadness becomes clearer. Fear stops paralyzing you, not because they disappear, but because they no longer govern your behavior. Instead of reacting with fury or despair, curiosity appears. Why does this affect me so much? What part of me is being touched? In that question, inner freedom begins. Seneca warned that life is not short. We simply tend to waste it. We waste it worrying about what does not depend on us. We waste it trapped in distractions, anticipations, and regrets. But when you live with Stoic awareness, you discover that every day has deep value. Every breath is an opportunity to act with purpose. Epictetus never promised to eliminate pain. He promised to teach you to live with it without breaking. His message is radical because it shifts the focus. Suffering stops being an external enemy and becomes an internal teacher, not because it is pleasant, but because it can teach you strength, temperance, and clarity. Here appears one of his most challenging meditations. Do not wish for things to happen as you want. Wish for them to happen as they happen. This is often confused with conformism, but it is the exact opposite. It is a higher form of wisdom. Peace of mind does not arrive when everything goes well, but when you learn to be well, even when it does not go as expected. Mark Manson would put it in modern terms: happiness is not about eliminating problems, but choosing which ones are worth it. Epictetus would have agreed. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every battle should be fought. These meditations are not abstract theories. They are practical tools. When you apply them, Little by little, you stop feeling dragged by your emotions. You begin to see life as a training ground. Each difficulty becomes an occasion to practice inner mastery. Each loss becomes an opportunity for detachment. Each injustice becomes an exercise in dignity. Stoicism does not promise a comfortable life. It promises a life free from emotional slavery. Sometimes, the real challenge is not understanding philosophy, but living it. Epictetus did not want students who repeated phrases, but people willing to embody his teachings. That is why he insisted on daily practice, on observing yourself when no one is watching, on training when no one applauds. Today, we live surrounded by noise, a scattered mind, a tired soul, constant comparison, permanent urgency. In this context, Epictetus's words are more current than ever. Many people have spent years reacting in the same way to the same kind of pain. A criticism triggers anger. A failure triggers collapse. Happiness becomes tied to external factors. That is modern emotional slavery, living without self-governance. The first practical teaching against this is clear. Stop before you respond. When something bothers you, do not react immediately. Observe. The mind seeks instant control. Wisdom seeks understanding. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" That change of question transforms the experience. One of the most powerful Stoic exercises happens in the space between stimulus and response. Each time you feel anger, frustration, or sadness, take a conscious pause. 3 slow breaths. In that silence, remember that you choose your attitude. This small habit, practiced daily, can reshape your mind more than years of well-intentioned advice that was never applied. Epictetus taught that real control does not mean avoiding chaos, but remaining steady within it. That steadiness is not rigidity, it is clarity. When you begin to live these teachings, something important happens. You stop waiting for life to change in order to be at peace. You understand that the real work does not happen outside you, but within you. Epictetus insisted on this because he knew the deepest suffering does not come from facts, but from a lack of self-governance. Most people live reacting. They react to other people's words. They react to mistakes. They react to loss. That constant reaction exhausts, weakens, and confuses. Stoicism proposes a different path. Observe first, respond later. That space, even if brief, is where inner freedom is built. One of the oldest practical exercises of Stoicism is detachment from outcomes. It does not mean indifference or lack of commitment. It means doing what is in your hands with dedication, and then releasing what does not depend on you. You work, you study, you love, you give your best, and then you accept the outcome. Anxiety decreases when you understand that the result does not define your worth. A clear example appears when something is lost: a job, a relationship, an opportunity. The pain is real. Denying it would be dishonest. But suffering intensifies when the mind endlessly asks why it happened, who to blame, or how everything would have been if things had gone differently. Epictetus proposed another question: what depends on me now? That single question turns despair into direction. Another central practice is negative visualization, known as premeditatio malorum. Each morning, take a moment to imagine losing what you love, not to distress yourself, but to awaken gratitude. This exercise strengthens the mind because it prepares it. When the possibility of loss is contemplated with serenity, attachment softens and the present is valued more. Seneca called this rehearsing adversity before it arrives, not out of pessimism, but clarity. The human mind needs contrast to appreciate. When you get used to imagining absence, each present moment becomes a conscious gift, not something guaranteed. The nightly review is another essential practice. Before sleeping, revisit the day with honesty. Ask yourself where you acted with virtue and where you yielded to impulse, not to punish yourself, but to learn. Marcus Aurelius made this exercise a silent conversation with himself. When you write it down or think it through, you begin to see patterns. And when you see them, you can transform them. Epictetus also taught mastery over desire. Not to eliminate pleasure, but to avoid becoming a slave to it. Every impulse, every instant gratification, every intense desire is an opportunity for training. Delaying it for a few moments creates space. That small delay builds freedom. He who conquers his passions, he said, conquers tyrants. The modern world feeds constant desire, always more, always now. Stoicism responds with moderation, not as renunciation, but as mastery. Choosing what is right instead of what is easy strengthens character. Discipline, understood this way, becomes freedom. Accepting what is inevitable is another cornerstone of this practice. Many pains do not come from what happens, but from fighting what already happened. Radical acceptance is not surrender. It is applied intelligence. When someone hurts you, you can practice patience. When someone betrays you, you can practice clarity. When you lose something, you can practice detachment. Epictetus said, you can choose not to feel harmed. In modern terms, that means reinterpreting pain. Instead of thinking, they humiliated me, think, this reveals a wound I need to observe. That reinterpretation does not erase the experience, but it transforms its effect. Living each day with awareness of finitude is another Stoic practice. Not to live in haste, but with presence. Remembering that time is limited removes what is superfluous. Seneca wrote that it is not that we have little time, but that we waste it. When you remember this, upon waking, each action gains weight and meaning. Controlling language is also part of the training. Speak less, listen more. Avoid constant complaining. Complaining feeds powerlessness. Moderation in speech protects energy. What you say reinforces what you think, and what you think shapes your character. Epictetus taught that wisdom does not always comfort, but it always heals. It does not seek to please the ego, but to strengthen the soul. That is why his teachings sometimes unsettle. They point to the wound so you can heal it. Saying no to excess is another form of practice. Excess of opinions, stimuli, judgments, pleasures. Every limit you place on your impulses is space you reclaim for calm. The mind trains in moderation the same way the body trains with discipline. These practices do not require blind belief. They require application. Epictetus did not ask for faith. He asked for observation, observing how you react, observing what dominates you, observing where you give away your power without noticing. That is where true inner work begins. As these practices settle in, you begin to notice a quiet but profound change. It is not that life becomes easier. It is that you become steadier. Chaos does not disappear, but it stops ruling you. Epictetus considered this steadiness the true freedom. For him, fate was not an enemy, but a training ground. You cannot control the current of the river, but you can decide how to swim in it. Resisting the flow only exhausts you. Accepting it with intelligence allows you to move forward. When something goes wrong, the mind often reacts with protest. It shouldn't be this way. This is unfair. Why me? Epictetus proposed another posture. Recognize that what happened is already part of reality, and your task is not to argue with it, but to respond with virtue. That shift turns helplessness into conscious action. Each obstacle then becomes a lesson. Each difficulty becomes an opportunity to practice temperance. Each loss becomes a reminder of detachment. Not because pain ceases to exist, but because it stops being useless. It becomes formative. One of the most radical ideas of Stoicism is understanding that not everything that hurts is harmful. There are experiences that wound the ego but strengthen character. There are failures that destroy illusions but build clarity. Epictetus taught that suffering stops being an enemy when it is accepted as a teacher. In modern life, this teaching is especially necessary. We live surrounded by stimuli that promise constant comfort and immediate satisfaction. Any discomfort is perceived as a failure. Stoicism restores a wider view. Not every discomfort must be eliminated. Some must be understood. Radical acceptance does not imply passivity. It means acting without inner resistance. When you accept what is, you free up energy. That energy can be used to decide the next step with greater clarity. It is not about resigning, but about stopping the waste of strength, fighting what cannot be reversed. Epictetus insisted that personal dignity is measured by how you respond, not by what happens to you. You can lose possessions, position, recognition, even physical freedom, but as long as you keep mastery of your mind, you remain free. That idea runs through all of his teaching. Another essential dimension of this philosophy is service. Epictetus reminded us that the human being was not born only for himself, but to collaborate. Goodness is not an isolated act. It is a way of relating to the world. Serving does not diminish you. It expands you. When you help without seeking recognition, when you act with justice even when no one is watching, you strengthen something that does not depend on applause. Virtue, for the Stoics, was not an abstract ideal, but a daily practice, small acts repeated with coherence. From this perspective, the meaning of life is not found in pleasure or accumulation, but in living according to the rational and social nature of the human being. That implies acting with integrity, self-control, and consideration for others. Accepting fate does not mean loving everything that happens, but understanding that what happened is already part of your path. The question is no longer, why did it happen, but how can I respond with dignity? That question restores power. Epictetus taught that you can be invincible if you do not compete in what does not depend on you. When you stop measuring your worth by external factors, your peace becomes priceless. No one can take it from you because it depends on no one else. This inner freedom is not loud. It is not announced. It is not displayed. It shows itself in how you move through the world, in how you face criticism, how you pass through loss, how you hold calm when everything around you is shaken. Sometimes progress is not immediately visible. There are relapses. There are days of reaction. There are moments of fatigue. Epictetus never denied that reality. That is why he insisted on constant practice, returning again and again to the beginning. Observe, choose, act. As long as you keep training your mind, even stumbles become part of the path. There is no failure in honest practice, only learning. And in that continuous learning, little by little, Life stops feeling like a constant struggle and begins to feel like an exercise in presence. Over time, something becomes clear. Stoicism does not seek to change the world around you, but to change the relationship you have with it. It does not promise a life without blows, but a life in which those blows do not destroy you from within. Epictetus understood that true peace is not born from controlling reality, but from governing yourself. Many people spend their lives trying to modify the external world to feel better. They change environments, relationships, goals, hoping calm will appear there. Stoicism reverses that logic. It teaches that serenity does not arrive when everything settles, but when you learn to remain stable even when nothing is. Epictetus did not speak from theory, but from direct experience of pain. He was a slave, he was poor, he was injured, yet he was never defeated inwardly. His body could be subjected, but his mind remained free. That may be his most powerful teaching. Freedom begins the day you decide to govern yourself. In this life, you cannot choose everything that happens to you. You cannot prevent someone from hurting you, something from being lost, a plan from failing. But you can always choose how to interpret it. That choice, though silent, defines your emotional destiny. When you understand this, something grows lighter. You stop living on the defensive. You stop handing your peace over to external factors. You begin to recognize that many of your reactions were not inevitable, but learned, and what is learned can be transformed. Epictetus taught that each thought is a seed. What you plant in your mind ends up becoming your inner state. If you plant fear, you harvest anxiety. If you plant judgment, you harvest conflict. If you plant gratitude, you begin to reap calm, not because life changes, but because your way of seeing does. That is why he insisted so much on inner observation, not fleeing pain but looking at it directly, not numbing emotion but understanding it, not denying the wound but refusing to turn it into identity. Stoicism does not ask you not to feel. It asks you not to be ruled by what you feel. We think wisdom is in books, but in truth, it has always been in the silence of a mind that observes itself. Epictetus did not want followers who repeated phrases, but people willing to practice, to stop before reacting, to question their impulses, to choose with awareness. Think of all the times life tested you, how many times you believed you could not bear it, and yet here you are, breathing, continuing. That was not luck. It was an inner strength you may not have known you had. Epictetus would say, that is the clearest proof of your power. You can fall without becoming what hurts you. Stoicism does not teach you to escape fear, but to walk with it without surrendering. It does not promise constant happiness, but lasting strength, and in the end, that strength becomes a deeper form of well-being. Each Stoic meditation acts like a mirror. Some show you your patience, others your ego, others your ability to accept. All of them remind you of the same thing. The power is not in changing the world, but in changing the way you look at it. Epictetus said that no one is more unhappy than the one who never faced adversity, because he never had the chance to discover his own strength. So, when life challenges you, there is no need to celebrate it, but there is also no need to run. Just remember that the challenge is part of the training. You can be invincible if you do not compete in what does not depend on you. That means your peace is priceless, because it does not depend on results, opinions, or circumstances. It means you can be in the middle of chaos and still remain calm. You can lose much and still be yourself. That is a freedom no one can give you or take from you. It does not come from outside. It cannot be bought. It cannot be inherited. It is cultivated today as you end this reflection. It is not about believing in Epictetus. It is about testing him, applying a single one of his teachings, observing your thoughts when discomfort arises, not fleeing pain, practicing the pause, being grateful for what already is. You will discover that the power was never hidden. It was always in you. Remember this: you do not need to control the world. You only need to control yourself. If you achieve that, nothing and no one will be able to disturb your peace in a definitive way. And when doubt appears, because it will repeat silently, "What depends on me is calm. What does not depend on me does not belong to me." That phrase, lived and not only thought, is a key to serenity. So, live, observe, accept, let go. And each time the noise of the world shakes you, return to yourself. In the silence of your mind, you will find the voice of the wise. And in that voice, the freedom that has always been waiting for you